Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing brought to you by New Zealand Sports Radio here on, the 24th of May. And yes, we come to you at 7 a.m. every single morning. It's your best way to start the day up to date with all the important sports news. And today we have Sluts plummeting down the league. Warriors granted exemption to loan players. World Rugby still dreams of a global season, and Woods and Mickelson to play for $10 million, and that's US, folks. Let's get on to the football news. And in the Belarusian Premier League, overnight Sluts drew 1-1 with Rue Brest. That's combined with Oislok losing to Energetics 1-2, means that Sluts, who were top of the table a couple of weeks ago, have now slipped down to 5th in the table. Smolovich game versus Minsk has been postponed. This is the second week that Minsk have had a game postponed, and this is because of the coronavirus outbreak amongst their players or amongst their club. So you got to wonder how long it'll be before Minsk can actually play again. They were already 2 games behind everybody else. We still have Verbitsk versus Dynamo Minsk to happen overnight tonight, and so tomorrow morning we'll bring you an update of how the table looks. And I'm going to hand you over now to Stephen, who'll take us through our birthdays today.
Well, good morning, everybody, and everybody is having a great weekend. And birthdays today, a man who is just as comfortable underwater as he is above the water, a New Zealand Māori and Kiwi Rugby League international, and finally a 1976 field hockey gold medalist. Well, here we go. We kick it off with Selwyn Gerard Meister, QSM, born this day, the 24th of May 1946, is a former New Zealand field hockey player who was a member of the national team that won the gold medal at the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal. Meister, who turned 74 today, was awarded the Queen's Service Medal in the 2012 New Year's Honours for services to hockey. Meister earned a DPhil in inorganic chemistry from Magdalen College, Oxford, as a Rhodes Scholar. Very intelligent man. Moving on, David Thomas Watson, born on this day, the 24th of May 1966, is a New Zealand former rugby league footballer who represented New Zealand in the 1980s and 1990s. Watson was a Taranaki and Auckland representative before being selected to represent New Zealand Māori in the 1986 Pacific Cup. He again represented the Māori against Great Britain in 1990. Watson, who turns 54 today, was selected for the New Zealand National Rugby League team in 1989. He went on to make 15 appearances for the Kiwis, his last being in the 1993 Test Series against Australia. And finally, William Trubridge, born this day, the 24th of May 1980, is a world champion and double world record holding freediver. He was born in the UK but moved to New Zealand when he was 18 months old. As of 2013, Trubridge holds the world record in the free immersion and the constant weight without fins discipline, and was the first to break the 100-meter barrier unassisted. Trubridge mainly competes in the depth disciplines. He additionally scored the highest number of points for an individual at a team's world championships, which was 313.3 points, which he achieved at the 2010 freediving Teams World Championship held in Okinawa, Japan. Trubridge, who turns 40 today, can hold his breath underwater for 7 minutes and 29 seconds. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to hold my breath right now because I'm going to send you back to Paul.
Well, what a segue, Stephen. Thank you very much for our birthdays this morning. Happy birthday to all of them. Let's hope they have a nice cake to eat. Moving on to rugby news now. And yes, World Rugby still hopes to be able to come up with a global season. A joint statement that came out from SANZAAR and the Six Nations. Wow, a joint statement. This is new. We're definitely in unprecedented times. And it said, even though there are many different preferences From the outset, the nations have adopted a mindset that has sought to eliminate self-interest and recognise that the international and club game have shared mutual benefits that, if approached and managed correctly, can enable both to flourish. A further consultation process in total transparency with unions, clubs and players will commence as all parties work towards an aligned global calendar that can deliver a clear and coherent narrative. So far, what that means has been that the Six Nations might move by a month and the Rugby Championship happen at the same time, and then the mid-year tours move to October, so the tours happen back together. So we end up with 2 windows of international games. Let's see if that's really what they mean, or if there's something a bit more there to help with a coherent narrative. But it is interesting that Mark Robinson, the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, has called on the idea of the Nations Championship and says that perhaps there are better alternatives available. So that'll be interesting to see. He's also said that they're looking at that window between Super Rugby and the Mitre 10 Cup to play a North-South game, or at least if you read between the lines, that's what he's saying. So North Island versus South Island game. And they're still looking at the Farah Palmer Cup. And also what he's quoted as saying on that one is, we're absolutely committed to it. We hope to be able to announce in the coming while what we are going to be able to do around the Farah Palmer Cup, what semi-professional or professional women's rugby looks like. So that's going to be interesting to see what they come up with in that space. Across in Australia, and Rugby Australia has terminated the contracts, or has released the 3 players who said that they were cancelling their contracts. Those 3 players obviously were Isaac Rodder, Harry Hockings and Isaac Lucas, who are all signed for the Queensland Reds in Super Rugby. And they were all, and 2 of them had just recently re-signed long-term contracts in Australia, and clearly were plans for the future for Australian rugby. They've said that some talks have been asked, would you welcome them back? And they said, look, we're concentrating on the players that have stayed and have been supporting the sport. Look, the difficult decision for the stand down came after 70% of the entire workforce have been stood down, which equates to 150 workers who are now receiving a job seeker subsidy. So that's why, and at the same time, 189 professional rugby players in Australia accepted a reduction in pay for an interim period. So it's not even a permanent one. So you can understand why they've decided to take that, why they've decided that actually it's best just to release the players. They just say they could have taken legal action, but that would be the last resort, and they couldn't see the benefit of really doing that. That brings you up to date with all of our rugby news. I'm going to hand you back to Stephen now. He's going to bring us up to date with our league new update.
Thanks again, Paul. League news this morning: the Warriors have been handed a lifeline by the NRL to bring in loan players to reinforce the already hit injury side. The NRL resumes next week, with the Warriors taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons on Saturday, but they will do so without several key forwards. Been a tough time for the Warriors. The losses of Lisa Mao and Jazz Tavanga to long-term injuries added to the earlier absence of Bunty R4 and Jackson Frey to leave the Warriors short on front row players and having to request the NRL provide special dispensation to allow them to sign players on loan. That request was first denied, but Warriors CEO Cameron George revealed that the league bosses had reversed their decisions. We were declined about 10 days ago, and I went back in to bat for the club. I'm very grateful the NRL for giving us approval, he told NZME's Lachlan Waugh. I think they got a better understanding of the situation we're in, rather than just looking at the numbers of the squad actually understanding what each player brings to the table, where they're at with their career and at what position they play. NRL's head of football, Graham Annesley, said the Warriors were a unique case deserving an exemption. Everyone appreciates the extreme lengths that the Warriors have gone to and to try and bring this competition back to life, Annesley. So good news for the New Zealand-based side, and maybe a little bit of good news for referees as well. The NRL have secured a significant win with the referees union, dropping their threat of industrial action and just in the nick of time as their feud threatened to go nuclear. After a dramatic day where both sides fired shots at each other, the referees union eventually relented on Friday night and called off weekend arbitration. Under the deal, the 22 full-time referees will be employed both this year and next year, with one referee system to be a trial that is reviewed at year's end. A working committee of players, coaches, and referees and management will be set up with their feedback handed to the commission before a call is made on 2021. The development came after the union infuriated the NRL on Friday by accusing them of overlooking player safety and labelled them arrogant and like a bull in a china shop in rushing to make changes. It's simple. Today's game is safer with two refs, the Professional Rugby League match officials said in a statement. On numerous occasions, the second referee has picked up potential causes of harm to players which were not detected at the same time by the other three match officials, nor the bunker. This includes tackles, holes, throws that can cause significant injuries. The comments angered ARL Commission Chairman Peter V'landys, who immediately said the referees had lost all credibility through the claims. So there we have it. We have it in league news this morning. Always something happening, Paul, and something's happening right now in Auckland. We're starting to get a little bit of rainfall, so we may not have to borrow some water off you people down in the Waikato.
Oh, well, yes, water restrictions in Auckland at the moment, or at least people are asked to conserve water up there. For those of you that are unaware, down here in Hamilton, yes, there are no such issues with the mighty Waikato river running through here. Having left my washing out overnight, I hope it doesn't rain down here. I hope it stays dry, to be honest. So it does dry, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Moving on then, and Naomi Osaka, the #1 women's ranked tennis player, is now the #1 women's ranked athlete as far as payments go. She earned apparently $37.4 million last year, or 61.5 million New Zealand dollars, making her the richest paid, or the richest, or the most paid, female athlete last year. This is a record eclipsing the previous best, which was Maria Sharapova back in 2015, where she earned 29.7 million. And Serena Williams is now the second most paid female athlete after being the top for the last 4 years. She's ranked at 33 over all athletes, and Osaka is ranked at 29 out of all athletes in the world. Moving on into Formula One, and they have agreed a 30 million budget cap cut down to 145 million. You might remember that we reported that Ferrari and Red Bull didn't want to go below 150 million, whereas other teams were pushing for lower than that. McLaren saying they wanted to go as low as 100 million. And it looks like they have compromised at 145 million for next year. It'll be reduced by another 5 million the year after, down to 140. And then from 2023 to 2025, it will go down to 135 million a year. This is on top of some aerodynamic or freezers on aerodynamic testing as well. And they're looking at having a graded system where the worst team will be able to spend more on their development for the following year than the best team. So it's going to get quite complicated, which is unsurprising for a complicated technical sport. Let's be honest. So there's some other minutiae in there, so do look into that if you're interested. Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson are going to have a playoff playing for $10 million US, which will be going towards the aiding of charity. They'll be joined by Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in this competition. And the last time they played for $9 million US, Mickelson beat Woods, and that was in 2018. This time, obviously, with their partners. So with Tom Brady partnering Mickelson, and Peyton Manning will be partnering Tiger Woods. There'll be no caddies, but they'll be allowed to drive their own buggies. I'm a bit disappointed they're not walking the course. Personally, I think walking the course is a good thing. This follows Rory McIlroy's £4 million event involving Dustin Johnson, Ricky Fowler, and Matthew Wolff, also in the aid of charity as well. Finally, in NBA news, there are talks for them to resume at Florida's Disney World Resort in late July. It sounds like they were being held at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex, which will be a single site for games, practicing, and housing. Talks are apparently going on at the moment between the resort and the players. Obviously, with ESPN being the broadcaster, you can understand why a Disney resort might be chosen for this. Also, Florida is where we have seen the UFC resume, and also WWE as well. So, unsurprising of the choice of state. So far in the US, there have been 1.64 million confirmed coronavirus cases and 96,000 deaths. So yes, safety and all those protocols will need to be in place for that. Don't forget, folks, to like our Facebook page, New Zealand Sports Radio, and also if you prefer to listen on the go, then you can listen to us on your favorite podcatchers, be that Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Acast. We're on them all. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio for that, and you'll get all our morning sports briefings there, all the long talk interviews. Next week, I have the CEO of the New Zealand NBL. I have the CEO of the Northern Mystics. I have a beach volleyball international, a Springbok, and also a cycling team owner, all lined up for those interviews. Also, there will be the Hash Rugby Chat on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Do You Know Sport on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And Swinging from the Hip as well at 8 p.m. on Thursday night. All those shows will be available on the podcast, so just subscribe there. Have a great Sunday, folks, and do try and stay warm.